What's up, heroes? I just finished watching Darling in the Franxx episode 19. Here is my official review of episode 19. I hope you're pretty hyped for this. It was a crazy episode. We got a lot of information on Dr.Franxx, on the Klaxosaur. Well, not that much information on the Klaxosaur, but a lot of information on Ape, Humanity, the Plantations, Dr.Franxx, all that good stuff. I have a lot of new theories here to discuss with you guys. Also, some really cool information I looked into regarding telomers and some DNA research in the real world, so I can understand how that translates to the Darling in the Franxx verse as well. So I actually learned quite a bit about different science facts and stuff from watching this episode and doing outside research, which I'm very excited to share with you guys. I think it's going to be a really cool review. So I'm going to go through chronological order of the events that occurred in this episode, just like every week the same way, except I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time on the science stuff when we get to it. Let's start with Warner's backstory, because that's where the episode starts. So right away, before we do that, though, I want to announce something, because I almost forgot, but there's not going to be an episode next week. Unfortunately, we're going to have another second special episode, not episode 20. Episode 20 will come out in 2 weeks. Might make a video on that anyways, probably will, but I'll just mention that in this video just so you know. Anyways, let's get back to it. So, the Werner backstory starts, and we see his appearance is rather rugged. He doesn't really care for himself. His hair is very long, kind of like a generic scientist trope kind of look. And I actually like his look a lot because it reminds me of Eraserhead from My Hero Academia. If you're not familiar with that, also kind of reminds me of Hei from Dark and Black Season 2, and also a little bit of Matthew Malloy from Marvel. If you know any of those characters, those are all characters I really like. So I liked Werner's appearance, Dr.Franxx's appearance from back in the day, because it reminded me of those guys. Anyways, he's not too pleased with himself, or Ape to an extent, having said that Ape uses forceful means to achieve their ends, but he's no different. He then clenches his fist, and that's when the flashback actually starts. Forgot to mention that. It doesn't start with the flashback, it starts with Werner talking to Ape. And then we get the flashback, and we find out that Werner was a scientist specializing in illegal research, notably cloning, and that's when Ape recruited Werner. We then get the Ape backstory. So, interesting. Ape was a group of scientists with no known origins or nationalities. Basically, they were a group of the most accomplished and skilled scientists in the world, and they remained anonymous. That's basically what Ape is. Unless they're, some people are theorizing that they're aliens. I don't really think that they are. I think they're humans. I just think they remained anonymous. And like I said, they are some of the most highly skilled scientists from all over the globe. I don't think they're aliens, but that is a theory that's out right now. So they revolutionized magma mining with their technology. So magma mining was already a thing, but they revolutionized it with their technology. Basically, what they did was they created machines that would dig deeper than ever before, and they also created more efficient uses for magma than ever before. There's also this mention of the Lanark Club, but we don't get much more information on that. That's something I do want to look into more, though. Anyways, humanity then proceeded closer to its apex due to Ape's technology and this advance in magma. Werner then meets Carina Milsa. Now, here's where we get into the really interesting stuff that I was talking about at the beginning of the video. So, Carina is a well-known scientist in the field of regenerative telomere medicine. Now, when I saw that in the episode, and I saw how Werner seemed to have been very taken back by Carina's title. Like, he had heard of her, like she's famous. I looked into what telomere research is, what regenerative telomere research is in the real world, and here's what I came up with. So, for those of you that don't know, here's a really quick and interesting science lesson. Telomeres are a cap at the end of each strand of DNA that protects our chromosomes, like the plastic tips at the end of a shoelace. Without the coating, shoelaces become frayed until they can no longer do their job, just as without telomeres, DNA strands become damaged and our cells can't do their job. Telomeres protect vital information in our DNA. Cells replenish by copying themselves. This happens constantly through our lives, and each time a cell copies, the telomeres get shorter. Eventually, telomeres get too short to do their job, causing our cells to age and stop functioning properly. Therefore, telomeres act as the aging clock in every cell. Without the protection of telomeres, our cells will age and die. So that is what Carina specialized in. Carina, not Katrina. Carina specialized in regenerative telomere research. So that's what a telomere is. We can assume that regenerative telomere research is regenerating those telomeres on the strands of DNA so that cells can continue to keep the body in tip-top shape, basically. So we also eventually learned that Ape was looking to become immortal. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but we can assume that they brought Carina on board because this all ties together. Although Ape achieved immortality through a different means, through magma, perhaps magma interacted with this telomere research, though, in terms of keeping the body in tip-top shape. It might just not be the fact that magma like is magical and makes someone, immortal. It could be that magma was that one key link they were missing to getting these telomeres to regenerate, to keeping the body in basically perfect shape all the time. So they need that magma to, accomplish that. That's just a theory, though. Anyways, it makes sense, though, but we move on. Apes deal with Werner. So we find out that Werner said that what Ape expects to him is out of his field of expertise. As they're meeting, he mentions that. So we know that Werner's field of expertise was cloning. There's some other things like he was, kind of really good at, but we don't know what that is. We do know that he was really good at cloning, though. But being that he said that what Ape wants him to do is out of his field of expertise, we know it's not cloning. We know that Ape is trying to achieve immortality through magma, so we can reasonably assume that Ape brought Werner on board to help them deal with magma specifically and not so much cloning or cloning at all. Now, it's kind of funny here to me because Werner was famous for doing immoral and illegal research, yet Ape still recruited him and paid him a hefty sum of money, more than he even expected for doing this job. And surely he already expected a lot of money from this deal because he was told that they were paying a lot of money. We already know Ape is unethical. We already know that they are a-holes. And this further reinforces the fact that Ape really doesn't care about ethics at all, that they're just willing to bring in anybody who can get the job done. So it was like, kind of a little bit of indirect reinforcement of that fact. I like that. They're messed up. We also further get revelation, I guess that's what I was going to say. I don't know if that's the right word, though. Let me just put it like this. We also get more information on Ape's goals. So we already know that Ape wanted to become immortal, but now we know that it's through the use of magma energy that they realize that they could become immortal. Now, humanity loses reproductive functions when they become immortal, and Werner dislikes this idea of becoming immortal as he reflects that it causes a loss of true humanity. He said he'd prefer becoming immortal through robotics rather than messing with his biology using magma. So, although Ape is, at the apex of leading this revolution of immortality on magma, he doesn't like that. He doesn't like that at all. But humanity does indeed become immortal, slowly at first, but they slowly do, more and more and more. It starts with the wealthy people. Obviously, you have to be wealthy to afford this kind of treatment before it went mainstream for everybody. And the class divide only got worse and worse as the wealthy people were immortal and the other people weren't. Populations began to get out of control as people weren't dying off. Now, funny enough, I actually know a little bit about this because of Marvel and research I did after watching Infinity War, but I'm not going to spoil that for anybody who, you shouldn't even be talking about spoilers anymore. The movie's been out for a long time, but basically, because of that movie, I know how population and birth rates work. I looked into like the formula for all that. So it's pretty obvious stuff anyways, to be honest. It's like you have the birth rate divided by the average deaths per year, and the population, the total population in there. That formula will get you basically the birth rate. Like, I'm just going off memory here. Thing is, since no one was dying off in Darling in the Franxx, it's not that they were having more kids. It's just the fact that the kids that they were having, plus the fact that nobody was dying off, meant that cities were getting overpopulated. So mankind began to restrict reproduction from non-immortals because immortals couldn't reproduce anyways. So there are two ways of dealing with overpopulation. There's obviously, ceasing to exist, and that would lower the population, or slowing the birth rate, and that would also lower the population. So they went with the second fact. Then we get a little scene of Kokoro and Mitsuru. I'm not sure how much I feel about this scene, to be honest. It was kind of meh. We learned that they may never like each other due to the memories that they've had lost or altered, even though the rest of Squad 13 is kind of explained to Kokoro and Mitsuru, like who they are and the times that they've had together already. Really, this scene is just not that important to me right now. Like, there's only 5 episodes left. Do we really have time to cover this Kokoro and Mitsuru thing? And would I rather have that screen time, would I rather have that screen time given to Kokoro and Mitsuru over, say, the Klaxosaur Princess, Werner, the Nines, Ape, Hero02? Not really, to be honest, guys. With only 5 episodes left, we need to use that screen time wisely. Sorry, Kokoro and Mitsuru, but there's other things I'm interested in right now. Moving on, we find that Carina and Werner fell in love. And shortly after that, the Plantation Project was announced. So the plantations were created originally not to fight Klaxosaur because Klaxosaur weren't around just yet, but they were originally made to counter the rapid desertification that was spreading across the globe, starting in North America. So shortly after that, the first Klaxosaur appeared at an offshore magma energy mine in Australia. It destroyed the entire mine and then went to make landfall, stopping after several nukes were dropped on it. It took several nukes to stop one Klaxosaur, and then half of Australia became an internment zone. Crazy stuff. Klaxosaur then started appearing all over the globe, attracted to magma energy. Plantations became more mobile Klaxosaur fighting fortresses. And then Franxx meets the first captured intact Klaxosaur. He found it incredibly beautiful, and then it was also discovered that Klaxosaur were made of XX chromosomes as seen in female humans. Now, Franxx says he doesn't know what that indicates, but he has a bad feeling about it. So it's really interesting. The Klaxosaur are half biological, half mechanical, but they have female chromosomes in them. So all the Klaxosaur are technically female, not male. But the Klaxosaur princess refers to them as her brethren. It's really weird. And Hero is a male who's part Klaxosaur now. Is he the only male Klaxosaur out there? But Hero hasn't even achieved puberty ever. So is it even fair to say that he's a male if he has female chromosomes in him from the Klaxosaur genes? It's just this whole weird thing to think about, man. It's definitely a strange thing. So we get a lot of information in this episode, but we don't get that much information on the Klaxosaur backstory. Now, you guys have probably already heard of my theory, which is disproven now. But as I was watching this episode, it was starting to look like my theory would be confirmed, but instead they went a different route, and my theory was disproven. What theory am I referring to? Well, like I said, you may have already heard of it, but I'll summarize it in like 10 seconds or less right now. Basically, I thought humanity was mining magma. They needed a better way of mining magma. They created the Klaxosaur to help them mine magma, and they created the parasites as cores for the Klaxosaur to power the Klaxosaur so that the Klaxosaur could get magma for humanity to thrive. Turned out that wasn't the case, and I kind of wish it was the case, actually, because I think that's a cooler backstory, in my opinion, than what we actually got from the Klaxosaur, which is that they are an ancient race. Maybe we'll get more information on them, and I hope we do, but again, we only have 5 episodes left. We might not get more info on the Klaxosaur. Now, I will make a quick disclaimer. Even if we don't get any info on the Klaxosaur for the rest of this show, I think that leaves us a potential OVA explaining the Klaxosaur backstory, so that'd be cool. I really don't think we'll get a season 2 of this anime. I think it's extremely unlikely. Perhaps there's a chance at getting an OVA or 2, though, and I do think an OVA could be the way to go for explaining the Klaxosaur backstory if we don't have enough time left in the show with the 5 episodes we have remaining. Since we still need this final mission that Squad 13 is going to be sent on, we still need the Rebellion arc. We still obviously will get the 9s fighting Squad 13. Like, that's definitely set up perfectly. And then we still have to get the interactions between Werner, Hero02, and the Klaxosaur Princess. Plus the whole side story with Kokoro and Mitsuru. Plus the whole other side story with Ikuno apparently becoming a main character in the show. There's a lot going on, alright? So that's definitely going to be a problem. Anyways, 2042 AD, and the startup trial for the Franxx prototype begins. The Franxx wouldn't start. It was discovered that they needed reproductive organs from the pilots, and the pilots they were using were immortals and had no reproductive organs. Carina then volunteered herself to become a Klaxosaur pilot, and she died, unfortunately. Carina's death, along with others, potentially foreshadowed her DNA being a part of Zero 2. Her backstory. Oh, so this is like something in my notes that I kind of just threw in this part because I want to talk about this, but I didn't really know where to put it before this. Basically, I think there's a chance that Carina is going to be a part of Zero 2. Why do I say that? Well, like I said, Carina was a famous scientist in regenerative telomere research. Telomeres are connected to DNA, and we saw that Carina was willing to place herself in a lab rat sort of role in terms of the Franxx. So I think it's possible that this is foreshadowing for Carina to be a part of Zero 2. Not just that, but also the fact that Carina and Werner said, Carina said to Werner that she wants children. So the fact that she was basically studying how DNA works, basically a lab rat willingly, basically said she wanted kids. It's basically, and then later on we find that Werner was cloning the Klaxosaur princess and it's hinted to be Zero 2. I think that kind of could be foreshadowing for Carina's DNA to also be in there with the Klaxosaur princess. Maybe Zero 2 is Klaxosaur princess and Carina DNA. Maybe Werner DNA too, but it's just speculation at this point, really. Anyways, many lives were lost failing to pilot the Franxx. Eventually, yellow blood cells were found to be a key conduit for the Franxx, plus having them ride in male and female pairs, which took the stress off the pilots. After that, the parasites were founded officially. Humanity found a new use for the children once they gave up their reproductive organs, ironically, to pilot the Franxx to fight the Klaxosaur. Now, are parasites clones? It's not said that they are. It's not even really hinted at the fact that they are, but it just makes sense that they would be, because we know that cloning is a thing in this verse, and it works. And we know that humanity needs a steady supply of parasites to pilot Franxx, to save them from the Klaxosaur. Most humanity is immortal unless there are some other people that haven't gone under the treatment, but without reproduction, how are these people created to begin with? So yeah, I think it's possible that parasites are clones, even though it wasn't directly said or even really implied. When you're just looking at the overall scope of the world and how things are right now, it would kind of make sense if the parasites were clones. And that does tie in with my original theory about parasites being, created just to be chorus for the Klaxosaur, which, by the way, we get a little bit of Klaxosaur backstory here. Really, we just know that they're an ancient race, but we don't get any explanation of why they have these human-looking things. Basically, it looks like humans covered in YBC in the cores. That's not explained at all this episode, so that's kind of unfortunate. Anyways, Squad 13 scene comes up, and 02 apparently needs some maintenance. The rest of Squad 13 goes to talk to Papa about Mitsuru and Kokoro. They try to get Papa to give them their memories back. We find out that Ape isn't having any of it, and that soon Squad 13 will be sent on their final mission. Hero says, well, if that's the case, we don't really want to be working for you guys anymore. We can't see you as our Papa anymore because of what you're doing to us, treating us this way. And Ape says, fine. You'll be relieved of your duties if you beat this final mission, basically. Maybe Ape is thinking that Squad 13 will perish on this final mission anyways, or even if that's not the case, they just think that they won't have any use for them anyways. So at that point, maybe Ape would just X them off, or they would just forget about him. We don't know, but we'll find out. Franxx vs. Klaxosaur, the early days. That's the next arc of this episode. So here's where we see Werner meet the Klaxosaur princess. It's pretty insane. The first Franxx would basically suicide to take out Klaxosaur. The first Franxx, not one, but Franxx plural. The first Franxx units basically would suicide themselves to take out Klaxosaur. It wasn't that efficient. There were eventually better ways developed for the Franxx to fight Klaxosaur. Obviously, we know that refers to their magma weaponry, and they probably got more knowledge of the anatomy of the Klaxosaur. They found out about the cores, their weak spots, etc., etc., etc. We can assume all that stuff because we know that's how it works. The gardens were then created in plantations to house parasites, basically grooming them as ideal Franxx pilots. Werner gets older, he loses his interest in the future of mankind, and he begins to feel out of place. He decides to look into a more perfected life form that isn't human. So despite all this guy's research into making humans immortal, he gets bored. He gets bored with it, and he begins to find that humanity isn't beautiful, and he wants to find a better life form. He hears this rumor about a Klaxosaur princess, a queen bee, so to speak, of all the Klaxosaurs, and he begins to do his research into that Klaxosaur princess. Surely enough, Ape being as powerful as they are, they get that information first. They find out exactly where she is, and Werner expresses his interest in going there. They send Werner with a team of 2 other scientists and some soldiers to go meet the Klaxosaur princess, and they tell Werner to bring back some DNA. Now, this seemed a bit like a plot hole to me. It really makes no sense to me how they thought this plan was good. Let me explain. The first Klaxosaur they ever met, it tanked multiple nukes to be beaten. And now they're sending basically 3 scientists and 5 soldiers to the Klaxosaur princess, which is probably the most heavily guarded place on Earth, with Klaxosaur all over. How did they think that mission would actually be a success? It actually was a success, but that's really just plot power. Like, I don't see how Ape could have thought this plan would work. It just makes no sense to me. Like, how did they think this guy was gonna go in there and come back with her DNA and make it out alive? Like, what? It makes no sense, right? But he does make it happen. So the Klaxosaur princess meets with Werner. The other soldiers are killed off. You know all this. We find out that it's an ancient civilization, as I've said already, but this is the scene where we find out that they are. The Klaxosaur princess appears in front of Werner, smells him and licks him, says she smells her brethren on him, which again is kind of a weird use of terminology considering that all the Klaxosaur are female anyway. She says he deserves worse than death, and she then bites his arm off. Werner then falls in love with the Klaxosaur princess. He already thought she was the most beautiful thing ever, but having his arm bitten off by her it just sent him overboard. He fell in love with her. He found it so alluring. He's kind of a weird guy like that. So it's kind of funny because the Klaxosaur princess said that she wanted to make him experience something worse than death. I think she didn't want to just take 1 arm, but she wanted to take like 2 arms, 2 legs. But when she saw how much he was enjoying it, she was like, nah, get this guy out of here. I don't want him in my throne room anymore. This guy's a disgusting freak. I'm kind of kidding partially, but that's what happened, man. He loses his arm, she takes it, and then somehow when she was doing that, he grabbed her hair and ripped it out, and she didn't notice. Somehow he was bleeding out and still made it back. I don't know, man. Like I said, this whole scene is fishy to me for a number of reasons, but it's still cool. It's still cool. So, Werner falls in love with the Klaxosaur and loses almost all his faith that he had left in humanity, which wasn't much faith, but that little faith he had left, he loses basically in humanity, falling in love with the Klaxosaur, not even just the princess, but the Klaxosaur in general. Towards the end of the episode, we find out that Hero knows what Franxx did to Zero Two via the memory link that we had accomplished during the piloting of Strelezia from before. And he says that he will never forgive Werner for what he's done to Zero Two. Could that be referring to the torture that Dr.Franxx put Zero Two through when she was younger? It could be. I think that's pretty reasonable because we know that he did do some messed up stuff to her, so that's reasonable. But there could be more to it as well, because at the end of that episode, Werner says basically to Zero Two that she would probably hate me if she knew the truth. So could Hero be referring to something else? Perhaps Hero saw memories that Zero Two herself still has repressed or regressed, and perhaps Hero knows more about Zero Two than she actually knows about herself, and he knows something that only Werner also knows about at this moment. That could be referring to her origins as a clone of the Klaxosaur princess, possibly as a clone of Carina and the Klaxosaur princess, possibly even further, a clone of Werner, the Klaxosaur princess, and Carina. Or it's referring to maybe the fact that there were other Zero Twos before this Zero Two, and they were failed experiments. There's a number of ways this could play out. As the ending scene shows, Dr.Franxx, Werner, is looking at a bunch of embryos in, I don't want to say vials, I don't know the terms of these, like basically giant glass jars, let's just go with that, with the embryos in there. And he says that soon my dream will come true, show me your perfected form. But then the camera pans out and you see like multiple embryos all in that room. It's not just one, there's multiple. So are those all Zero Two clones, the original Zero Two clones? Or are those the original 9s? It could be. It could be. The problem here is the timeline, because in that scene, Werner was still relatively young. Current Werner is very old. Actually, if we look at the timeline, we can assume that his current age now is about 120 to 130 years old, which is very old, obviously, and he's not immortal. So he's getting up there. We can assume that the Franxx verse, the average lifespan is different from the real world verse. Perhaps 120, 130 years old is not like impossible to achieve in the Franxx verse, even without immortality. Obviously, that's the case, at least for Dr. Werner. So that the timeline there doesn't add up with the age of Zero Two currently. So same with the 9s. So perhaps those were the original clones or something, and they actually are clones. You guys get what I'm saying. Anyways, that's the end of the review, man. 22 episodes of nonstop Darly for Talk. That's some good stuff. By the way, I should have said this in the beginning, but for next week, or anytime you're watching a video of mine where I talk like this for a long period of time, you don't have to be sitting here watching, and you might not be, but just making this disclaimer. A lot of my viewers like to kind of hear these longer videos as podcasts, basically. So, I mean, if you want to go work on your homework or something, or do some laundry or whatever you got to do around the house, and you just want to hear somebody talk about Darlifra, about the recent episode you just watched, by all means, put this on in the background, have my audio going, and go do something else if you like. Just an option, just throwing that out there, since I'm not going to have too much crazy stuff going on in the visuals when my reviews are going to be this long. It would take way too long to edit, and I want to get these reviews up relatively quick, because it's still hyped, obviously, and I want to talk to you guys and hear your opinions on it. With that said, leave me your thoughts down below in the comments. I'll take a look. I'll get back to you. And if you want to support my content on Patreon, there's also a link in the description. Thank you guys very much. And if you can't do that, but you still like my content, definitely hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you're not. With that all said and done, guys, you have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and I will catch you next time.助けたい